Hi, welcome back to the Gemhawks YouTube channel. I hope you're having a beautiful day today. For the tutorial today, I want to show you a very simple technique which is viewed by many as the entry to wire work. When we are working with beads that have drill holes, there are a lot of techniques that you can use in general bead stranding, which are absolutely fantastic, but the first time you come across a gemstone that doesn't have a drill hole in, we can be a little bit surprised by that and not sure how to proceed. So the spiral cage is one way that we can really accessibly start adding undrilled gemstones to our designs. Now I'm going to show you two different techniques of achieving basically the same thing today, and you can decide which one works best for yourself. I'm also going to show you how to utilise the spiral cage in beaded designs as well, and alongside that also some of the pitfalls which I've seen occurring when people decide to use a spiral cage with beads but without using the drill hole in the beads to strengthen the design. So I'm going to show you a couple of different things today, but it really is a very accessible and simple technique for anyone who's completely new to wirework even. So if you'd like to join me down at the board, I'll show you a couple more of the designs that we'll look at, and then we'll crack on with how to make those for yourself. So we have a few examples here of how you can encapsulate a gemstone. This is a lovely citrine tumblestone which has just been caged inside a spiral of wire. Now the wire I'm working with is very readily available. It's silver plated copper in 18 gauge or 1mm. So you can see that that's really easy to add on to a necklace all ready to go. No drill holes. Also, if you have some of these beautiful point beads, now these are drilled, which is fantastic. However, if you come across some which are undrilled, then you can also, by sizing the design up ever so slightly, you can encapsulate these kinds of beads as well. This is a point in a very dusky labradorite. There's not very much labradorescence in this one, but I still love it because it's labradorite. And I've just added a little bit of a loop on top of this one, and it's still quite secure to hang from a piece of thread around the neck. Very simple. It is actually drilled, but you've not used the drill hole at all. And then that is what your spiral looks like. So you can put quite elongated beads into them, or you can squash them down and cover a bit more of the bead surface, perhaps using less wire. You can just play around until that sits like a nice smooth spring, whatever makes you happy. So I'm just going to clear the deck slightly. Now you may have noticed just here that I've made the beginnings of a bracelet using this design, and I'm going to show you very briefly how to connect all these later as well. So I'm just going to pop that over to one side. So for the first part of the design, I'm going to take around about 5 inches or so of that 1mm gauge wire, 18 gauge, and this is a silver plated copper. So what normally happens on my bench is things go flying. So what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to start very close to the end of those pliers, but not quite all the way, and I'm going to start by forming a circular shape. And I'm opening and closing those pliers just to get that shape going. There's your first circle, and you've got a nice smooth line coming away. Now, dependent on how much of your bead you want to cover will depend on how closely you start wrapping around in a circular form. So I'm going to make this one a little bit tight to begin with. And the reason for that is I'm going to turn that end up, which means that I don't want my bead to escape. So this second circuit around the coil is to stop the bead escaping. The first circuit, I'll actually push that up and turn that into a hanging loop. Then I can start opening up. I've got my 2 circuits around the centre, and then I start to open the design up a little bit. Now I'm going to show you 2 different techniques, and this is the first. So I've got about just under halfway along the wire, maybe 2 inches of 5 inches. And I'm going to come to the other end of the wire, and what I need to do is create this in an S shape. So I'm going to do the exact same thing, another loop on the far end. I'm going to start again quite small. And just for the sake of neatness, I'm going to do the same technique on both ends. So 2 circuits of the design nice and snug before I start that opening up, and I'd like to keep that similar in distance as I have done on the first side. Now for this part, what you'll need to do is move little by little along your design, and if it starts to go a little bit awry, you can just open that out and continue. When you get a certain distance through, you're going to need to flip that over and try to get the two sides looking identical, because when we meet in the middle, we want that to be the same kind of size on opposite ends. So I'm going to flip that over like so until I get those looking very similar. And I want this to be very, very close, as if the line continued around the lower loop and as if the line continues around the upper loop. So I need to bring that in slightly closer on both sides. Like so. So for the next section, I'm going to use my round nose pliers, and to do this task, you can use a cone if you have one. But what I'm going to do is use my nails to support the wires as I just draw them down the tip of the round nose pliers like so. And I'll show you the other side as well, if I can withdraw that out safely. So just push little by little, and I'm just opening that up one strand of wire at a time. Dependent on how much work hardening you've put in by opening and closing your pliers will depend on how hard that is to pull down. So withdraw your pliers and you've got two relatively equal funny spring forms. You might need to play with them slightly so that they sit at a similar size. It looks like the world's weirdest bikini at this stage. So for the first technique, what I'm going to do is grip a hold of the dead centre between those two spiral sections. I'm just going to fold that round. So I'm going to support as much on the one side as I possibly can, making sure that I'm at that point that's exactly halfway between those two central coils. And I'm just going to carefully close that around. Now, one of the pitfalls of the first design is you can get a little angle at the point where you made that bend. So that's one of the reasons I'm going to show you the second variation. That's actually worked reasonably well. So I'm going to borrow one of my beads from the pot, and I'm just going to see if that fits in. So what we would do is just open that back out very gently, pop the bead in, and then close that up. And to create the hanging loop, what I'm going to do is you can see that the central circle on one of those spirals is just proud. So I'm going to pop the pliers in and just turn that up at 90 degrees, and you've instantly got a hanging loop for your bead in a spiral. So with that first technique, one of the pitfalls is that you can get a slightly uneven line at the point where the two spirals are joined, and all it takes is a little bit of patience. Rub your thumb against the wire to warm it slightly, and then use the flat edges of your pliers just to smooth that into position if it doesn't go as well as you'd hoped. I'm going to show you now a second technique which nets you exactly the same results but will give you a slightly different process to work through. So again, we have around about 5 inches of that 1mm gauge, 18 gauge silver plated copper wire. And what we're going to do is start spiralling in exactly the same way as we did the first way around. So the first 2 circles are going to be quite close together before we start opening up ever so slightly to create enough space to house our lovely agate bead. So I'm going to estimate that's just slightly under halfway there. Now, instead of making an S bend, this time we're going to make a weird curly C shape so that both of those coils are coming in to meet together in the centre. So you can start your coils exactly how you want to, whatever's comfortable for your hands, but you do need those 2 coils to be side by side to begin with. So there's the first 2, and then we're going to start opening up slightly. And what we need to do is get these really, really close together, so they're almost about to touch, but they need to be the same kind of size. So I'll flip over to the other direction now. Like I say, it's a weird, funny, like a bean or a C shape or something, until they're quite close together. Now we're going to do the exact same technique with the round nose pliers of pushing these up, and they need to be in opposite directions. So just opening those out slightly like so. Tipping it up a bit like a witch's hat, perhaps. You can give that a bit of a squeeze to make sure that you're happy with that. But then the other one has to go in the opposite direction. So going to start in the centre and push those wires down little by little until you get that almost cone shape, and withdraw the bead. Now what we're going to do is very, very slightly part those, so you've got a bit of space in the middle, and then we're going to very gently start by closing that up. Now you might need to handle that slightly, open it up a bit more as you go. But what you're not seeing is that equal and opposite bend as we made with the first design. So you have an opportunity to wear the wire slightly less work hardening, and then you can open that out by hand so that that fits the bead that you're looking to create. So you might find it slightly wider in places than other places rather. So what you can do is just tighten that up if you need to. You do still end up with a very similar result to the first technique rather. So again, I make sure that I'm happy with how that looks as a spiral before I open it up and pop in one of those beads. And if we put them side by side, they shouldn't look too different. Pop those into position, and you can see that the bead is not going to come out of there in a hurry. So what I'm going to do for this one, rather than turning the loop up like we did on the first one, what I'm going to do is squash those right down, so that we've got a really nice spiral design around our drill hole bead. Now I've also got some short offcuts of the 1mm gauge or 18 gauge silver plated copper wire. What I'm going to do now is show you a technique for joining this together like a rosary bead fashion. So for the next technique demonstration, it's all part and parcel of the same really easy and accessible technique, and it just goes to show that once you've nailed a technique, you can use it in lots and lots of different ways. And all I'm doing is I'm saving those tiny offcuts. It's maybe 1.5 inches to 2 inches of that 1mm 18 gauge wire, and that's all I need to make connectors. And then after that, I'm going to show you what can go wrong with the spiral cage. So to generate a nice bracelet or necklace, whatever you want to do in this fashion, what you need to do is get that bead hole lined up with the hole in the end. So I'm going to find that hole to begin with, because my eyes are not the best, can't always see them. So I need to make sure that the bead isn't too tightly controlled, that I can't get that to spin over to the end. And obviously you might be able to do this slightly more easily than I can, but we're looking to get that hole lined up to those spirals that we made in the end before we slide the wire all the way through. So it's coming out the original spirals that we created on either side, and then all we're going to do is a very simple single wrap rosary technique. So I'll show you on the one side. I'm estimating that I'll need maybe just under 3/4 of an inch of wire. I'm going to tilt that over, and I'm going to create a loop quite close to that angle I've just made. Now before I go anywhere else, I'm going to make sure that that bead does not escape, because I find it quite tricky to get them to get the holes lined up. As I say, my eyes aren't the best, so I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other end, even though I've not completed this little tiny loop that we've made. So again, just under 3/4 of an inch from the end of the wire, I'm going to turn quite a sharp right angle, and then I'm going to make a very small loop close to that angle, and I'm going to pop the pliers in like so, and then rotate that around, take it across, and I'm making a very open gap there, because that means I can add it on to the rest of my design that I've been creating earlier. So once that is in the loop, and I'll just show you very, very simply, if you make that loop quite open, you can add that on, close the loop up, support that with your chain nose pliers. Actually, what I might do is get a second pair of chain nose pliers, the finer the better, hold the loop, and then you can take that tail all the way around. You might need to move that until it's comfortable for you. So you can see the tail. I'm going to take that tail all the way around the neck of the wire that goes through the centre of that bead that's inside the bead cage. So giving that a bit of a squish. My hands are shaking because I have diabetes, and sometimes my blood sugar just goes a bit crazy in the hot weather. So I'm going to show you how to close up the loop on the other end without anything in, because you can add more to that later if you need to. So you're supporting the loop that you've created, but you're not squeezing down where wire crosses over. I'm going to take that tail and draw that all the way around. Give that a squeeze until that's wrapped completely around the core of the wire. And then in a little while, I'm going to add that second one on. Before I do any of that, I want to show you a pitfall. So one of the things that I have seen in the past is that people generate these lovely bead spirals and then they link them together with open and closed jump rings. Now, open and closed jump rings do thousands and thousands of wonderful things in jewellery making, and if you open and close them correctly, they can actually be quite strong. But what can happen if you don't have a soldered joint, or you don't have multiples of those jump rings, as you do in chainmail. Chainmail is super, super strong because there's just so many links. I'm going to show you what can happen to those bead cages if you don't, when you're using the drilled beads, pass a wire or even a beading thread down the centre. So if we turn up the loop on one end here, and we've got a loop on the other end here, it's really very easy to catch your bracelet or your necklace on a doorknob or something, and all that will happen with very, very little pressure is that your bead will escape and you'll end up with really pretty but completely useless piece of wire. When you have done the rosary linking technique and you've got bars of wire connected by wrapped loops, that is super, super strong. That would take quite a lot of force to come apart, and if it did, it would maybe be one or two pieces. Additionally, if for any reason something catches on one of your individual spirals, let me grab another one. The individual spiral can catch on something, and it's quite reasonable that you might lose one of your beads. So if your bead spiral is linked by the rosary linking technique, you're not going to lose the bead anyway, and it's actually not too difficult to repair. You can take one of these links out and replace it with another one without upsetting the rest of the design. So I hope that that's useful for you, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon on the Gemhawks YouTube channel. Don't forget to join me on Facebook once a fortnight on a Monday evening at 8 PM UK time. I host a Facebook Live show, and we have lots of chat, we have questions, we have requests for tutorials and workshops in person and via the internet. And I also have cabochons, gemstones and beads for sale. So hopefully I will see you at some point either on Facebook, back here on YouTube. Thank you very much for continuing to support me, and I'll see you again very, very soon. Bye for now.